Hi guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro RPG. Now, after all the scandal in the recent weeks with Wizard of the Coast and the OGL, where I've been spending ages looking through legal documents and trying to work out whether Wizard of the Coast is really being evil or not, that's not what this channel's about. When I set up this channel, I wanted to talk about games apart from Dungeons and Dragons. So I've decided to get back to something fun. I've decided to have a look at this Advanced Fighting Fantasy, the role-playing game, by Graham Bottley. Now, this is the second edition, which came out in 2011, but it's based on much older books, which were written by Marc Gascoigne and Pete Tamlyn, which came out in 1989, 1990, and I believe it's 1994, were the three books which have been combined into this one. Now, these are based on the old fighting fantasy game books, Warlock of Firetop Mountain, Forest of Doom, and so many other absolutely classic books, which in the UK especially really got me into role playing because I was enjoying reading these fantasy books where you would choose your own adventure. Turn to page 53 if you go down the fork in the path, turn to page 98 if you attack the orc. It really gave me an into role playing, and I want to play Dungeons and Dragons and lots of other games later on. Now, this is a method of fleshing out the rules of those, but keeping it very, very stripped down and very, very basic. Now, me and my group got into playing this in the past few years because one of the Games Masters got tired of lugging masses of books to game sessions because he needed to have, if he was running Dungeons and Dragons, he'd need the three core rule books, he'd need the setting, he'd need different books for what monsters he was using, etc., etc. And he was carrying a big holdall, and he was getting sick of that. Even when we were running things like Star Wars, we'd have lots of books with different ships in them, rules, characters, NPCs, races, everything. End up carrying a big wad of books. And he got sick of that, and he wanted something which was really, really simple, where there's not going to be much rules lawyering going on, because the rules are so direct, and something where he was only really going to be carrying one book. And this is what he chose, Advanced Fighting Fantasy. And it's a great little system. We've been having so much fun with it. Now, if I flip to the back cover, as I am wont to do, a complete role-playing game in the classic fighting fantasy world. Let your imagination take you to Firetop Mountain or the Forest of Doom. Have new and exciting adventures. Contains all you need to play, including full rules for hero creation, comprehensive but fast game rules, more than 160 spells and magical powers, monsters, dungeons, and adventure creation. Advanced Fighting Fantasy is perfect for those completely new to gaming and veterans alike, and will provide many hours of fun. Now, when people talk about the OSR, the old school Renaissance, where they're going back to basics, you really don't get much more than that. This game is so stripped down. So let's start having a look through the book. Inside, well, we've got the usual intro pages, we've got a table of contents, the foreword, acknowledgements. The artwork inside is older in style. It looks like stuff that was done in the 80s. Obviously, this picture is dated 2013. But this is very much artwork that you would see in these game books, which wasn't the best. It's not absolutely classic fantasy art, but it is very evocative and very imaginative. And that's kind of what I like about it. It gets your imagination going. So, the introductory role-playing game. Well, what's really quite fun about this is here we are. We're on one of the first pages. We're on page 12 after all the intro pages and all that. And we've got an introductory adventure. We're getting straight into gaming. It's a big, heavy book, 176 pages. There's lots of meat in here. But we're getting into gaming. We're getting into playing straight away. Really like that. So we've got an adventure, the Wishing Well. Got various stats and that. We go through, and then we've got some sample characters. Now, this is where the core of the system comes in. Basically, you have 4 attributes and 1 derived one. You've got skill, which is your ability to do everything. Everything from hitting us with a sword, to dodging, to shipbuilding, to piloting a ship, to riding a horse. Everything is skill-based. So the higher that skill, the better you're going to be. Stamina, which is, as well as resisting poisons and things, it's basically your hit points. When you take a hit and you take damage, you lose stamina. You've got your luck, which allows you to re-roll things, and you burn through it as an adventure goes on. It recovers between adventures, and you can get things like luck potions, etc., which will refresh that. But luck allows you to retry things. You've got magic, obviously only important for magical characters, and it's their ability to cast spells and the like of that, and the magic points are what power those spells, except in the sake of clerics, because clerical magic works slightly differently. And we'll come to that, because while I think it's a really interesting system, it's not terribly balanced, but it's quite cool. Beneath that, we've got special skills, and basically these add to things. So this character at the top, Arion, has awareness of 2, brawling of 1. So when he's trying to spot something, he's not just rolling his skill, he's rolling his skill plus his awareness. So instead of having 7, he's got 9. When he's trying to brawl with something, he's adding 1, so he's rolling a skill of 8. And that's adding to a dice roll against a target number. It's really simple and really straightforward. He has no spells because he's not magical. One of the other things to bear in mind is that weapons do not do a dice-sized damage. Everybody rolls a d6, and then depending on the weapon they've got, what they rolled on the dice leads to certain amounts of damage. So the spear here does 2 to 4 points of damage. If you roll a 1 or a 2, you do 2 points. If you roll a 3, 4, or 5, you do 3 points. If you roll a 6, you do 4 points of damage. Also, armor works like that, where you're rolling a d6 for the effect your armor has. So he's wearing a leather cuirass. If he rolls a 1, 2, 3, or a 4, it protects him against none. It takes nothing off the damage. If he rolls a 5 or a 6, it takes 1 off the damage. So it makes things average out a lot more. For example, the warrior below here, the dwarf warrior, he has a battle axe, which on a 1 to a 4 does 3 points of damage, on a 5 or 6 it does 4 points of damage. So he's never going to really roll terribly and do virtually no damage. He's also not going to roll massively doing massive damage. It averages things out quite nicely. Okay, so we've got a few sample characters in here. Again, nice artwork, and then we're on to character creation. So it talks you through the various steps. If you're choosing to play a human example, you get a +1 to your luck. An elf gets +1 to magic. A dwarf gets +2 to stamina. They have special skills which they get for free. So elf hero starts with 1 point in these special skills, forest law and magic minor. So even an elf fighter gets a very limited amount of magic, gets a couple of spells. This is very much like original Dungeons and Dragons, where you would play an elf and they get that. But you can play an elf something else and tailor your character to that. So you're creating an elf warrior and you're putting your points into fighting skills, and you can be as good as a human warrior. But you get this little bit of magic in the background, which if you spend no experience, you spend no character creation points, you're not going to be able to do much. But it just adds a little spice to your character to make it more interesting. Dwarfs get underground lore and crafting. Dwarf heroes start with the following language. So they start off with Dwarvish and Common at various levels. And when you create your characters, you can choose whatever you want. If you're wanting to create a dwarf wizard, you can do. If you want to create an elf wizard, you can do. Obviously, the elf is getting points already into magic, so it'll be slightly better. But your dwarf wizard is going to be tougher because he's getting a bonus to stamina. It's playing up to the racial stereotypes, but allowing anybody to do anything. It's a very open system. Something I hated about early versions of Dungeons & Dragons, that they did so pigeonhole you into your role. This is a much more open form game. Carrying on through, got special skill descriptions, going through all of them, detailing what they can do. Then we've got talents, which are like your special abilities, advantages. So, Holy. This talent may only be taken by a hero with at least 1 point in the magical or priestly special skill, able to channel the power of his god, and once per day is able to double the effect of one of his holy powers. This may result in the power affecting 2 people, or affect double the area, or heal double the points, etc. So if they're casting heal and they get to heal a d12 points of damage, let's say, to one character, well, if they've got the holy talent, they've chosen that during character creation, they can heal 2 people of a d12, or they can heal 1 person of 2d12. And it's a very open system and allows you to choose what the effect of that is having. Lots of ones here. So Silvertongue, a hero with this talent, has the gift of the gab. And Perfect Charmer, any test against con, bargain, etiquette, or leadership will receive a +3 bonus. So when you're creating a character, you're adding these and you're making your character your own through their advantages. How to finish off the creation. So you've got your social status. We've got some sample archetypes here. They're turned round, so I'll just skip through them. We've got the game rules. So unopposed tests, opposed tests, where 2 people are working against one another. And then we've got testing luck. So if you are trying to be lucky and you're burning through your luck points. Movement actions, riding, falling, swimming, drowning, encumbrance. We've got social actions, bribery and conning people, disguise, hazards and hindrances. So doors and locks, light, poisons, all your standard stuff, traps, perception rolls, knowledge skills, how to handle experience. So when you get experience, you can spend it as you want. You know, increasing your skill costs 20 times the new score in experience points. Increasing your magic costs 15 times new score in experience points, etc., etc. We go through the combat and how that works, including all the different damage tables. Now, in the damage tables, it's got a column for 7. Now, this doesn't happen very often, but when you get a bonus on your roll, so you're rolling a d6 plus 1 or a d6 plus 3, you can end up getting a 7, and that's like a bonus extra bit of damage you do. But you can never do more than column 7 damage. So if you're using an improvised weapon, so you picked up a chair leg, even on an incredibly lucky roll where you've got a massive bonus, you're still only going to do 3 points of damage. We've got all the weapon descriptions. Armor, as I said, they've got their table. Likewise, they've got, if you've got a bonus to your armor, you might get a 7 and it's got an extra value. But they also have values for shields, which add. So if you're carrying a large shield and wearing a leather cuirass, and you roll a 6, you're getting +1 and 1, so 2. So your armor is doubled in effectiveness because you've got a shield. The armor descriptions, how dodging is handled in combat, rapid shots, healing and injury. Then we're on to the magic. So wizards tend to cast spells. They've got a difficulty that they're casting against, and they have a chance of the spell failing. We've got minor magic, so different cantrips. These are the kind of ones that an elf might get. If they're not a wizard, they're going to be getting some very minor magic they can cast. But some of these can be incredibly useful. Jab. When this minor magic spell is used, the caster must lightly touch target with an extended finger. Target will then feel like they have been firmly jammed with a sharp stick. Spell may cause 1 point of damage on a roll of 6 on 1d6. Be unaffected by any armor worn. If the caster desires, spell may be used at a distance for up to 5 meters away with a -2 modifier to the spell casting roll. Mend. Cantrip will repair small holes in wooden, metal, or cloth items. So little handy spells to have around. We've got the full wizardry spells. So we've got things like Flash, Befuddle, Glowing Eyes, Ignite, light spells, lock spells, thunder, strength, weakness. All the sort of standard types of spells you can be getting in a game book, but in a role-playing game as well. Your standard wizard fare. We've got sorcery. So another type of magic, and its spells, which are these 3 code letters, because this is the sorcery from the sorcery fighting fantasy game books. I believe they were actually called Advanced Fighting Fantasy game books as well. But they took the game books to another level where you had spells and you had to memorize the 3-letter code to cast them. So it would suggest ones at a certain page where you could cast the spells. We've got religion. Now this is the clerical powers, and basically you get standard abilities and you get extra ones. If we go on to one of the gods, we have Sindler here. Now, a priest of Sindler gets 3 spells. They get Bless, Ill Luck, and Heal. And they can cast each one of those once per day. There are some of the special abilities that you can get where you can cast 1 extra a day. I'm playing a dwarf cleric in it, and I've got that, so I get 4 spells a day. The 3 standard of 1 of each, and then a 4th spell I can choose to cast one of those a second time. But these spells they get are not totally balanced. So, Azrael here, the goddess of beauty and love. General powers, Bless. So you can cast Bless, and people get a bonus on things very much like the Dungeons and Dragons spell of the same type. We've got Heal. Well, it's healing magic. You heal people up. Very handy stuff. And you've got Commune, where basically you can ask a question of your god, which your god has to answer. Now, they may answer in a cryptic way. You might get a dream, you might get a vision, and it's not clear what the result is. But the god has to answer your question once per day, which seems to me to be an amazingly powerful ability, that a god has to answer your question once per day. But we've got all sorts of different ones here: warding, banishing, bravery, smite versus evil humanoids, etc. And your clerics get to cast those once per day. There's no roll for them required. They automatically work, although the effects might require a dice roll. So the amount that you're healing, for example, will be based on your magical skill. So the more potent you are with your magical skill, the more that you heal. But you don't actually have to make a roll for it. Got Gods of Evil here. Then we're on to a bit about the world. So the history of the world of Titan. Got a map here showing the different continents. Allansia, the old world, cool. The races of Titan, so history of the humans, the dwarves, the elves, the other major races, other intelligent races. And then we're on to Allansia, the land of adventure. And we've got places out of the books here. So we've got Port Blacksand out of... Is it Forest of Doom? No. City of Thieves. Out the City of Thieves game book, which is based in Port Blacksand. It goes into detail about that. We've got a map of Allansia here. We've got things like Firetop Mountain out of the Warlock Firetop Mountain. Talks about oceans and islands around it. And then we've got price lists. Now, I do like the way these handle prices, although it did lead to our campaign getting off to a bit of a weird start, because we started off with our 1d10 gold or whatever, and a night's lodging would cost about 7 gold, which would wipe us out. So during our first adventure, we'd arrive at a small village and have to camp in tents outside the village because we couldn't afford to stay in the tavern. It was kind of stupid. Our characters were on the verge of starvation because we couldn't afford to buy rations either. So one time when we attacked or got into a fight with some villagers and they turned out to have bags of fresh fruit and veg, it was like untold riches. We'd found food. This was absolutely fantastic because we could actually eat for the night. But the costs for everything in the price list tables are split into city costs, town costs, and village costs. So, something like a set of armour, which requires a blacksmith to make, will be cheaper in a city because there'll be more blacksmiths competing against one another, whereas a town might only have one, and a village might not have a blacksmith at all. So prices, even if the item's available, will be far higher in a village because this item cannot be regularly made. But when you're out in the villages, if you're wanting to buy meat and food, it's going to be a lot cheaper than it having to be carried into the city and pay for the people who transported it as well. So the pricing system's quite interesting, that you can end up holding on to stuff that you found and selling it elsewhere to try and maximize your profits from the loot and plunder you've found. Also means that a number of things can't be found, especially spell components. We've got crafting, we've got trade skills here, and then we're on to the director's guidelines. Basically, the Gamemaster ones talking through hero creation, combats, how to handle magic and priests, other situations, adventuring situations, how to hand out magic items, experience and development, dealing with the unexpected, planning adventures, campaigns, and hero death. And then we're on to the monsters and enemies section. So we've got tables here with various monsters going from boars up to zombies. And then we've got the descriptions of them. How to design new monsters. So an example of creating one, the puddle jumper. Non-monster enemies, so basically NPCs. You don't want to treat a person like a monster, you want to create them up with their own skills and things, so it talks you through that. Out of the pit monsters, special abilities. Weapons and armor used by the creatures from out of the pit. So where some monsters, like a vampire, could wear armor if they wanted to. It talks through the possibilities of that. Tables of all of that. Adventure ideas, adventure locations, giving you suggestions on where they should be set. Very basic introduction to games mastering, putting in subplots. It's got an interesting idea here for a dungeon generator where you throw a handful of d6 and you link them together, and it talks you through designing a dungeon, you know, what the results are, come up with different problems, so traps, monsters, etc. And you can randomly create a dungeon from this. And we've got sample 1, Agbar's Retreat, with the rooms described out. We talk through treasure, random generation of that, different potions you could find, different magical items. And we've got optional rules to flesh it out a bit. You know, extra talents, new special skills and talents, new races, if you wanted to add halflings, for example, into the world. It talks you through that kind of thing. Alternative unopposed tests, multiple magical special skills, new magical spells, fallen priests, new weapons and armor, just fleshing out the game and adding your own stuff to it. Then we've got appendices, which are mainly blank character sheet and lots of reference tables, leading us through to the index and the back of the book. So that is Advanced Fighting Fantasy. It's a very simple game. As I said, basically there's only 3-4 attributes. You've got the special skills which add to it. But even if you don't have a special skill, you can still attempt something. You can still use your skill. So if you don't have climbing skill, everybody can still try to climb. And if somebody's got a particularly high skill attribute, they're perhaps going to be the best at it in the party, even against people who have special skills in it, because they just have a natural talent at doing stuff. It's a fabulously fun, simple game. I highly recommend it. I'll put a link to the website in the description down below. And it's just great. It's a delve back into the days of the 1980s when I first picked up game books, and we've just had so much fun playing it. Anyway, I think I've waffled on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.